Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation. I'm excited to share with you some important insights on biomagnification and bioaccumulation in pesticide pollution. This is the Department of Entomology at the University of Agriculture in Faisalabad, Pakistan. Over the next few minutes, we will explore how pesticides move through ecosystems, accumulate in organisms, and magnify as they go up the food chain. So let's get started and delve into this critical topic. Pesticides are widely used in agriculture to control insect pests, but many of them do not stay confined to the target organisms. Instead, they often enter ecosystems and move through food chains. This movement can lead to long-term ecological and health problems that are quite concerning. Two key processes that explain how pesticides accumulate and magnify in the environment are bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Understanding these processes is crucial because they show us how pesticides can impact not just individual organisms, but entire ecosystems and, ultimately, human health. This connects directly to our overall theme of environmental safety and sustainable agricultural practices. Bioaccumulation is the gradual buildup of toxic substances, like pesticides, within an organism over time. The key idea here is that the rate at which the organism absorbs these substances exceeds the rate at which it can metabolize or excrete them. Essentially, small amounts of pesticides keep accumulating in the organism's body as time goes on. This process can have serious implications for the health of the organism and can even affect the entire food chain. Now, moving on to biomagnification. This is a related but distinct concept. It refers to the progressive increase in the concentration of these toxic substances as we move up through the different levels of a food chain. So, as a predator consumes prey that has accumulated pesticides, the toxin concentration becomes even higher in the predator's body. In fact, at each successive trophic level, the toxin amount gets higher and higher. Both bioaccumulation and biomagnification highlight how toxic substances can become more concentrated and potentially more harmful as they move through ecosystems. This is a critical concept in understanding environmental health and the impacts of pollutants on both wildlife and humans. Insecticides, as we've seen, can build up in the tissues of organisms over time. This means that even if the initial exposure is small, these chemicals can accumulate as they pass through the food chain. Pesticides that are present in the environment don't just stay there. They enter the biosystem through various pathways, such as water, soil, or directly on plants. Once inside, they tend to gather in the bodies of living organisms, which is what we call bioaccumulation. This process is concerning because it can lead to biomagnification, where the concentration of these pesticides increases as you move up the food chain. So, top predators, including humans, can end up with very high levels of these chemicals in their tissues. The effects of this accumulation aren't just about long-term exposure. They can be lethal or cause sublethal effects, meaning they might impair health without causing immediate death. This is especially important when we think about the broader impact on animal populations and human health. Understanding bioaccumulation helps us see the bigger picture of pesticide use and its potential risks, reinforcing the importance of managing and regulating these chemicals carefully as part of our overall approach to environmental health. As toxins move up the food chain, their concentration can actually increase, which means predators at the top face higher risks. This process is known as biomagnification. It happens when toxic chemicals, like DDT, remain in the environment and are indirectly consumed by organisms through their food. So, when an organism higher up the chain eats another organism that has chemicals like DDT in its body, those chemicals can accumulate in the higher organism. This is why biomagnification is such a crucial concept to understand. It shows how harmful substances can become more concentrated as they travel through food chains. It really highlights the interconnectedness of ecosystems and the importance of controlling pollutants at their source. Now, let's look at the key differences between bioaccumulation and biomagnification. First, bioaccumulation occurs within a single organism, meaning the organism gradually builds up contaminants over time. For example, a fish might store pesticides in its tissues as it's exposed to polluted water. On the other hand, biomagnification happens across the entire food chain. It's not just about one organism, it's about how these contaminants increase as we move up through predator-prey relationships. For instance, a bird that eats contaminated fish can end up with much higher levels of toxins in its body. The process of bioaccumulation is all about the buildup within an individual organism over time, while biomagnification involves the increase in concentration at each successive trophic level. Understanding this distinction is crucial because it highlights how pollutants can become more dangerous as they move through ecosystems, which ties back to our overall theme of environmental health and the importance of managing pollution sources effectively. Let's take a closer look at this slide. Here, we're focusing on the key points that really drive our understanding forward. First, it's important to recognize how these concepts connect to the overall theme of our presentation. They serve as the foundation for the strategies we're discussing. As we go through each point, think about how they interrelate and reinforce one another. This holistic view helps us see the bigger picture and understand the significance of these elements in achieving our goals. The most important takeaway is to see these points not just as isolated facts, but as interconnected pieces of a larger puzzle that, when put together, lead us to success. Let's take a closer look at the mechanism, or how this actually happens. Essentially, we're examining the process that leads to the outcome we've been discussing. It starts with a series of key steps that interact in a specific way. First, there's an initial trigger or catalyst that sets everything into motion. From there, various factors come into play, amplifying or moderating the process. These could be environmental influences, internal responses, or other variables. As these elements interact, they create a chain reaction that culminates in the final effect. Understanding this mechanism helps us see not just what happens, but how and why it happens, which is crucial for developing effective strategies or interventions. Throughout this process, it's important to note the connections to the broader themes of the presentation, how mechanisms shape outcomes, and why understanding them is key to making informed decisions. Let's start with environmental persistence. Some pesticides, particularly organochlorines, can stay in soil and water for many years. This means they don't break down easily and can remain in the environment long after application. Next, let's look at how these chemicals enter our food chains. They can be sprayed directly on crops, and sometimes they're washed into water bodies during rainfall or irrigation. From there, aquatic plants or plankton can absorb these pesticides, starting the process of bioaccumulation. Moving on to toxic buildup, herbivorous insects that feed on contaminated plants can accumulate these pesticides in their bodies. Predators that eat these insects, in turn, consume many contaminated prey. This leads to an increase in pesticide concentration as we move up each level of the food chain. Overall, these processes highlight how pesticides persist and magnify through the environment, contributing significantly to pesticide pollution and its broader ecological impact. One of the most important examples we look at involves DDT. So what exactly happened with DDT? Well, it was used extensively for mosquito and pest control, especially in the mid-20th century. Unfortunately, it didn't stay confined to just pests. It entered aquatic ecosystems and started accumulating in fish. This is where things got problematic. Birds, like the iconic bald eagle, would then consume these contaminated fish, unknowingly ingesting the toxic buildup. The impact was severe. The eggshells of these birds thinned, making it much harder for them to reproduce successfully. As a result, their populations declined significantly. This case was a wake-up call, leading to greater awareness around the world about the unintended consequences of such chemicals. Eventually, this led to restrictions on DDT, marking a pivotal moment in environmental protection efforts. It's a classic example that highlights how a single chemical, used without considering ecological impacts, can have far-reaching effects on wildlife and ecosystems. Let's take a closer look at organochlorine pesticides like aldrin, dieldrin, and endosulfan. These chemicals are highly persistent in the environment, meaning they don't break down easily. In fact, they tend to accumulate in living organisms, a process known as biomagnification, which can lead to higher concentrations as you go up the food chain. Now, shifting focus to the cotton ecosystem in Pakistan, where pesticide use is quite heavy. These pesticides don't just stay on the plants. Residues can be found in aphids and whiteflies. These tiny pests can transfer the residues to their natural predators, such as ladybird beetles and lacewings, which are crucial for biological control. This illustrates how pesticide residues can move through the ecosystem, affecting beneficial insects as well. Moving on to aquatic systems, pesticide runoff from agricultural fields often ends up in rivers and streams. Fish in these waters can accumulate these toxic chemicals, which poses a risk not only to aquatic life, but also to humans who consume fish. This highlights the broader environmental and health concerns associated with pesticide use, especially when it enters our water systems. Throughout entomology, understanding how these chemicals move and persist helps us better manage pest control strategies while minimizing ecological and human health impacts. Let's talk about beneficial insects first. Parasitoids and predators play a crucial role in controlling pest populations, but they are actually very sensitive to environmental changes and chemical exposures. When these beneficial insects are affected, it can lead to pest resurgence, meaning pests can rebound more aggressively, complicating pest management efforts. Moving on to pollinators, such as honeybees, they are vital for pollinating many crops and wild plants. Unfortunately, chronic exposure to harmful substances, like certain pesticides, can impact honeybees over time. This ongoing stress contributes to a decline in pollination services, which can have serious repercussions for food production and biodiversity. Finally, all these impacts on beneficial insects and pollinators lead to broader food web disruptions. When biodiversity diminishes, ecosystems lose their resilience and balance. This imbalance can cause cascading effects, altering how ecosystems function and affecting the insects and other organisms that depend on these natural systems. Overall, these points highlight how interconnected our ecosystems are, and how pesticide impacts can threaten not just individual species, but the stability of entire ecosystems. Contaminated food, such as milk, meat, and fish, can pose serious health risks. When these foods are contaminated, they may contain harmful substances that can lead to chronic toxicity over time. This means that even small amounts, if consumed regularly, can accumulate and cause long-term health issues. Chronic toxicity from contaminated food can result in severe health problems, including an increased risk of cancer, neurological disorders, and endocrine disruption. These are some of the most concerning health implications because they can significantly affect a person's quality of life and overall well-being. Understanding how contaminated food impacts human health underscores the importance of food safety and proper handling. It ties directly into the broader theme of this presentation, which is about the critical need for monitoring and controlling contaminants to protect public health. Thank you for your attention. I am Dr. Rashid Rasul Khan, an associate professor in the Department of Entomology at the University of Agriculture in Faisalabad. If you have any questions or would like to discuss further, please feel free to reach out to me at rashadkhan@uf.edu.pk. Once again, thank you very much for your time and interest today.